Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Bros podcast. My name is Ilan, and if it is your first time joining, welcome. I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host Jeremy. How are we, mate?
I'm well, mate. Yeah, nice little intro to the listeners because I think there would be a fair few more of you. So welcome to the show. We hope you have enjoyed our recent episodes, particularly you might be coming from our episode with Clint recently, Clint Stanaway. So that was a fantastic insight into everything going on in his life currently.
What a guy, eh? What a guy.
What a guy. It was a really nice, open, vulnerable chat. And yeah, definitely picked up a bit of traction. So if you guys are coming from there, welcome to our show. We talk all things personal development, relationships, navigating uncertainties in our 20s, mental health, physical health, anything that we find relatable in our lives. As we've always said, we hope that you guys might find relatable too.
And a very big point of relatability in one's 20s is finding a relationship that sticks, not just being in consistent situationships where you're perennially single. And I see it in our friends, some friends, of course, where they're dating and they're really hoping for it to eventuate into something more. But there's this common trend where after 2 or 3 dates, things tend to fizzle out.
Yeah, and look, there's always a lot of pressure involved with dating. You always want to get it right. And oftentimes you can get frustrated very easily, especially when things haven't been going your way and you've been trying for a long time. But there are generally themes and common characteristics that keep playing out. And like you've alluded to, we have seen that amongst even some of our mates closest to us. And I think what is great about it in a way is that they're not blind to it either. I think we're really lucky to be surrounded by people that are very much aware and acknowledge when things maybe aren't really going their way and they wanted to go their way in a different way. So with this episode and with what we're about to talk about here, a lot of the first step is just acknowledging what's going on, acknowledging where you might be going wrong in dating. And that is the first step to then putting into place an action plan to then get it right. Because if you can't acknowledge what you're doing wrong first, because oftentimes it might actually be you, which is the hard thing to acknowledge. It might be you might be the reason why things aren't going right, and it might not be the person or the girl that you're seeing each time. It might be you might be the common denominator. So you need to actually sit down with yourself and work out, okay, what am I doing wrong here first? Acknowledge that and then make that plan going forwards.
And I think what we might do actually, because I've got a whole heap of reasons, I'll pretty much just signpost them now quickly and then we'll go through each one individually. So if just kind of to reiterate the podcast, it's all about why you might be struggling to move on from that situationship into something a little bit more substantial, like a long-term
dating phase.
That's right. So first one is you're consistently going after those who are not compatible or not ready for a relationship. That's one reason, and we'll obviously get into it. Another one potentially is that you've become too serious and too intense too early on. Another one is you're being inauthentic in a way that it signals almost like a sense of low confidence. Another one is you're trying to become physical too early or you're waiting too long to become physical. And the last one is that you might signal what is very attractive for a short-term dating opportunity, but not so much for a longer-term dating opportunity. And again, we'll go through all of these one by one. But let's start with the first one. And this one I see actually a bit more frequently than I thought. And it's essentially you're going for the person who actually isn't ready for a relationship, or at least not with you. And there's nothing in their characteristics from that first date that suggests that they're ready for something early. They might tell you, I just want to have fun, or I'm going away soon, I'm going to go traveling. And you're attracting this sort of person where you're willing to go on dates with them, hoping that they might change their mind after 2 or 3 dates. But after 2 or 3 dates, their decision is the same as it was at the start. It's like, yeah, I may be here to have fun, but I'm not really here to lock something down long term.
And these are the relationships or situationships that really just go off of chemistry. They're so much into the spark. They're so much into the attraction of maybe going after the bad guy and not the good guy, the one that makes them feel a little bit on edge, the one that's maybe playing a few of those toxic games. They don't know exactly where they stand with them, but it's kind of hot because they don't know where they stand. It makes them feel like they're on edge. It's a bit edgy, it's a bit mysterious, versus someone that is actually being really truthful with them and really deliberate in their approach and being very intentional in their approach. But that feels too safe. That feels too boring for them. So they always just find themselves chasing that almost that bad guy, or for lack of better words, the bad guy, the one that makes them feel on edge, the one that might resemble a few toxic traits. And Hollywood doesn't help us with this. You see it all the time in the films and in TV shows, that it's always the ones that are a little bit edgy, the ones that make you feel a little bit on edge, that come across as more attractive, versus those guys that are actually a bit more of a safe place, that are a bit more deliberate in their approach. So we're exposed to this early on, just in childhood, by watching these things. So it doesn't help us as we do get older and we want to find someone for ourselves. But you quickly learn that you get nowhere by dating those types of people, by dating the ones that leave you on red and then respond hours later, by dating the type that is always hitting up your phone constantly on a night out, making sure that you are doing everything in the way that they expect you to act. Those types of relationships and those types of people very quickly become just yucky and give you this sense of just boredom, really, and a sense of like, it just feels like destructive to you at the end of the day. And you start to learn that, and then you start to actually change the way in which you approach dating. But I feel like it's those ones that initially have that spark, because it feels different. It feels like there's a bit of fire here, and it might not feel, and those sparks might only come later for someone that actually is a little bit more safer. And that goes to show with how men come across in early dating versus women too. I feel like women actually get that sense of closeness later towards a guy. Guys tend to latch on and fall in love a lot quicker than girls. So when we talk about sparks and we talk about compatibility, I feel like it's very much easy for the guy to get swept up. But when a girl feels that spark very, very early on, it might almost mask what is actually underlying. It might actually mask maybe the things that aren't so good in early dating, because they've felt that spark and they're like, oh, this is fresh, this is new, I must go with it. When in actual fact, there might not actually be any compatibility there. It might just be those early onset sparks that don't actually evolve into anything more than that.
So in short, you're essentially, if you're that guy or girl, you're essentially selecting for chemistry over compatibility. And the problem is, we know the research is quite consistent on this, that girls take longer to fall in love relative to boys. And that's something we'll actually talk about shortly. But I think something that's also really important here, I've seen also friends who are in this situation potentially where they have a failed situationship, or rather a successful situationship, because it didn't eventuate into anything more substantial. And then the person that the relationship or said situationship didn't work out with, that person is now dating someone else who they might perceive as less than them, or not having the same, boastful characteristics and traits. Like perhaps, it hasn't been uncommon for friends to be like, yeah, well, this person doesn't have a stable job. They're not like this and not in shape or whatever. And look, I think that's naturally a defense for us. Sometimes we want to try and make ourselves feel a bit better, because if someone doesn't select you, it ultimately bruises the ego and you feel vulnerable. And one of the best ways to kind of mask or kind of make sense of that experience is sometimes to devalue others. But there is an element of truth there, which is sometimes someone might genuinely just not believe they're worthy of your love. They genuinely might, on a deep subconscious level, believe that they're not worthy for a long-term relationship that is more stable. So they go for someone who might be a little bit more fun in the short term, or speaks to them in a way that you didn't speak to them. And that's not necessarily to say that they didn't think you were good enough. It's perhaps they were thinking they weren't good enough for you. And maybe it wasn't a conscious idea, but that's also something to keep in mind as well. But I want to go on to the next point now, because I think this one is actually a bit overlooked, and I think it's pretty important. And I think in our dating world, it's not too uncommon where you try to become too serious and too intense too early on. And this signals a lot of things. So firstly, it might signal that you don't have that many options. And whilst that might be the case, it can create a sense of pressure for this other person where in that early phase of dating, you don't really want it to be associated with anything other than a little bit of excitement, opportunity, novelty. As soon as you kind of start putting in a contract or you start saying, here are the terms and conditions, you all in a way remove that spontaneity, you remove the excitement, and you put a lot of this discomfort on this other person to try and make a decision when they don't even have all the data yet to know what decision they want to make. As I said, if you're a guy in this situation, we know that on a consistent population level, that girls take a little bit longer than guys to fall in love. Well, you might be reading the same book and you're a few chapters ahead, but now you've just spoiled the ending. And I think that's something to really keep in mind, because there's nothing wrong with being intentional and telling them, yeah, I'm looking for a long-term relationship. But there's a difference between that and saying, I'm looking for a long-term relationship with you. Like, think about the selection process of any lucrative job. Usually takes 3 to 4, 5 interviews sometimes. And there's a real filtering process because they want to make sure that they get the right candidate. Because it's much easier to hire the right person than it is to fire the wrong one, right? It's much easier to actually go and do your due diligence. But let's say you're going for a job interview and that job immediately offers you the gig literally after that first interview. There is a part of you that's probably happy being like, wow, they actually picked me. But there's also probably a part of you that's like, wow, did they not have any other candidates? Did they not think that there were other more competitive people to exercise potential? Were they that desperate? And that's the key word. Were they that desperate? And we know that desperation can be a real deterrent because it puts a lot of pressure on you and it doesn't make you feel special because you feel like you're satiating a need. And I say this a lot. It's like if you haven't had much success, of course you're going to feel a little bit more hungry. But when you're hungry, it doesn't mean you're going to go for the best nutritional foods. You're just going to go for what's available.
Well said, mate. And the only thing I'm going to add to that is actually the opposite approach. And you spoke really well there about being too serious and intense too early on. And I think the opposite is also a factor. If you're being too lax and too flowy and absolutely unserious for too long amount of time in those early dating phases, if you actually don't have any guideline and any advancements and any idea as to looking to progress it further, and that's almost where being too casual is sending a message. And if you get if you get a couple of too casual people, rather, that might make it easier to understand. If you get a couple of too casual people both dating each other and they're not actually verbalizing that, you know, maybe they actually want something more, the same thing applies. You get a sense of this person actually doesn't seem like they have it in them to commit, and that almost then seems like someone that is also untrustworthy in the opposite way. Someone that is too desperate might seem a little bit untrustworthy, and then someone that is way too lax also seems untrustworthy. So you have to find that happy medium, and you have to find that happy medium again just through your communication. So alluding to the point there you mentioned earlier about how women tend to fall in love women tend to take a little bit more time to fall in love as opposed to men. As the guy in that situation, if you like that girl much earlier on than you might think that they like you, or maybe they verbalize to you that, yeah, they're really enjoying dating you, but you know, they're not at that level that maybe you're at yet, just listen to them and acknowledge it and take that for what it is, and don't take that in an offensive way, because it's not offensive. It's just facts, and it's just the truth. And you should be happy in that scenario if your girl is actually telling you that, like, I'm really enjoying getting to know you and doing this thing with you, but let's just keep going the way we are. I do want to keep persevering with you, but I'm just not at that level of like wanting to take it to that next step just yet. That is the best thing that you could probably hear as a guy in that situation, because whilst your timeline might not be matching up, but in my honest opinion, I don't think any love timeline really matches up at the start. It wouldn't make sense to fully match up at the start, because we all come from different backgrounds and experiences and unique exposures. So listen to that and be grateful that you've got yourself a woman in front of you that is really open and honest with you in the most kind way possible. And she's still committing to you. She's not saying she doesn't want to keep seeing you. She's saying that she does want to keep seeing you, but she wants to just have a little bit of time to allow those feelings to just develop a little bit more, maybe before going exclusive or something like that. So with that point being, number 2, don't be too serious too early on. And on the contrary, don't be way too lax for too long of a period of time. It's about finding that happy medium and doing that through your communicative approach, being really effective with your communication.
Point number 3, you're being too inauthentic. And what I mean by that is to try and remove the wishy-washiness of that. That could look like a lot of things, but in its most simplest form, you're not presenting a version that's actually congruent with who you are. And intuition is a strong, strong marker of truth. And girls and boys, honestly, most people have a decent level of intuition to know when you're bullshitting.
Better, though.
I would say so. I think
way better.
I think a woman's intuition is one of the best superpowers. I wish I could have a bit of it. I think I have okay intuition, but it definitely could be better. Now, what does this look like? This might mean spending copious amounts of money on a first date when you're always the dude at bloody dinner being like, nah, this is too expensive. I can't get this and that. No. It might also look like you boasting about all the achievements you have because there's a part of you that believes they're not going to accept you unless you boast about said achievements. It looks like anything that presents a version of you that might be there to try and impress them for a sense of approval, but really that person is sensing that you aren't who you say you are. And that's a great thing because that removes a lot of the pressure. You can actually, as the old dating advice goes, be yourself. And that's fine because you can't keep up this act any longer because maybe you do trick someone for 1 or 2, 3 dates in that dating phase that you are someone with money, you are someone with a lot of status. And that might attract a specific type of person who buys into it. But after a few days, if you've set the precedent that, we're always going to be going to Nobu, we're going to go to Entrecote, we're going to go to these high-end restaurants or high-end bars, and I'm going to be spending lots of money on you, that's going to set the precedent for it to be a consistent expectation. It's like, can't we just chill at home tonight? What do you mean? I thought we loved going to these restaurants. I thought we loved going to these bars. I thought we loved going on these holidays. And I think over time, people can sense that if you're being disingenuous in that respect, it's not going to work out because think about it this way. If I can't trust your word, and we know that emotional safety is one of the biggest determinants for whether a relationship might flourish or deteriorate, then how can I trust someone who isn't even trusting of themselves to be themselves?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you do like going to those expensive things and restaurants and bars on your first dates, that's absolutely okay as long as you are in the capacity to continue that the whole way through, because otherwise, like you said, you are setting that fake precedent. You are setting that inauthentic kind of signaling to them, and it essentially just looks like you're trying to buy them at the end of the day. You're trying to buy the girl rather than actually get to know the girl, and that just screams low confidence, like you said, and that is very much picked up on from early on. Girls are very good at picking up on a guy that maybe is just trying to bribe them, that is just trying to get them the drinks, get them the food, to get them on that next date, rather than actually get deeper with them, get to know them, and ask them the important questions, and just be human to human. Just have a really good human to human conversation. It's not to say that you need to cheap out and just go on walks or drives as your dates and not spend a penny at all. But again, like what every point of this episode is kind of alluding to, is you have to find that happy medium, and you have to follow that through the whole way through. You have to show that you are that person that does back yourself. You do have that level of confidence, because if you come across and are seen as that person that has those values, and you really abide by your own values, and you trust yourself, then that person will then trust you after a few dates. It won't come from the get-go, like you mentioned, but that trust will build, and that's the whole point of these early dating situations and those early dates, is building that trust. Every date should be building upon the next one. You have not achieved anything if you've reached date 4 and you still feel like it's date 1. by date 4, you should have already spoken about things and expressed things about each other that maybe you haven't done early on, and that you probably shouldn't do too early on. But each date is building up on the last one. You're gaining that momentum. It's that snowball effect in the most positive way possible, and that comes with being that trustworthy person and really backing yourself in your values and through your conversation, and not just being that inauthentic person that just tries to buy them through Nobu dates.
Correct. And something I think that's really important, I was just thinking of before, for a lot of people, they show materialism, or rather they show love through their materialistic gestures, because that's how they were shown love in their childhood potentially. Yeah. Perhaps when they were younger, they didn't have parents that were emotionally present, but they did spend copious amounts of money on them, and they had access to their credit card, and they could do all these things, because if a parent couldn't show emotional love, well, they could show it through other means, through kind of materialistic gestures. So that person learns that, hey, that's how I received love. Maybe that's how I can signal it to other people. And we learn through Hollywood, and we learn through, pop cultural references, that sometimes the best way to cultivate a sense of some form of a relationship is through materialistic gestures. And it's done in the name of romanticism. But oftentimes, a lot of people don't like materialistic gestures because they know that it's not actually cutting deeper. There's nothing genuine about it. But for some people, that's literally how they show their love, because that's their reference point. Hey, this one's interesting. I was thinking about this point a little bit when I was writing this down, and it's the idea that you're trying to become physical either too early or you're waiting too long to become physical. I kind of want to start with you're waiting too long, because what does that signal?
Yeah, it signals that maybe you actually lack the confidence. Again, it comes down to confidence. It signals that you lack confidence, you're maybe insecure in yourself, and you're kind of unaware, and you don't really know how to make those moves and those first moves. And we've alluded to this in previous episodes where we've spoken about, how to master those early dates and how to really be the best version of yourself on those early dates. And that comes with some form of physical touch. And that's not trying to get into the bed early on those first dates and try to get really intimate with them, but you have to initiate some form of physical touch, of some form of making them feel desired. Like, no girl wants to be on date 1, 2, 3, 4 and beyond and not feel desired. Otherwise, they just feel like they're going for a job interview and they're just being sat across the table saying, what's your favorite color? What do you study at university? There needs to be some form of separation from a friend here, some form of desire to say that, like, I like you, and I like you in more of a way that is just as a friend. I want to get to know you on a romantic level. So that can just be with simple, maybe even just sitting next to each other on a first date or a second date, rather than sitting across like you're having an interview, sit side by side. Or, if you've got like the table, if you're sitting at a table, sit in that L shape almost, like, have them almost perpendicular to you rather than just like being right across you. And it's those little things that can just make a huge difference. Why? Because that gives you the opportunity to, maybe give them a little bit of a nudge, or a little bit of like a tap on the thigh, or, if you are having that deeper conversation and you feel like you guys might be on the verge of even having a kiss, then you can go for it. Then you can actually do it. And there's no harm in doing that and having a kiss early on in dating. But even if it isn't a kiss in those first couple dates, it should be some form of physical touch, some form of hugs and just like light-hearted touching that makes them feel desired.
Quickly, on that point about sitting next to each other, the amount of dates I've seen where they're both sitting kind of together, but none of them are facing each other. Have you ever watched like South Park or King of the Hill, where you got the 4 main characters and it's like a 2D screen and they don't turn towards one another, but they're just staring directly straight?
Smack bang face.
Yes,
the camera.
like it's like it's almost like they've got a rod in their neck that's preventing them from looking the other way. Yeah. That's what I think of. But I think you make a good point. It's like, there's nothing wrong with, it's not about going to 0 to 100, but it is about signaling that, hey, this is not just like a platonic relationship where there's no physicality. It screams awkwardness. It also shows that you're not kind of it's like you're not coordinated in your sexual mobility in the most.
What a way to put it.
I suppose you can, I don't know, I'd pull that out of my ass, but in a lot of ways it signals that that person's just not confident to take the next step. And, you know, it's not hard to have a friendship. It's hard to have a relationship because you're trying to cross a very, you know, there's an element of being vulnerable when you take that risk of like trying to kiss someone or to try even initiate kind of low forms of like physical touch. It's because you could get rejected.
Yeah.
And you could be, you know, there's a sense of embarrassment. So there's an element where you just kind of have to back yourself, but you do it in a respectful way. And you obviously have to understand that consent's a massive part of the picture. But there's also an element of reading people's body language and getting comfortable in that space, because if they say no or they're not comfortable, you'll also know.
Yeah.
But it's also not trying. But if you do sense that they are comfortable, it's also not trying to find 100 other reasons why they're not.
And on the contrary, getting into bed too early with them is also going to obviously turn them off. And this doesn't need too much of an explanation.
Why not?
Well, it just goes without saying. I mean,
Why?
if you're just trying to jump into bed too early, the girl can pick up on that, and they can pick up that you are really only after one thing and one thing only. And does that really signal good signs for a long-term committed partner that is looking for something more, or does that signal more so a sign that they are just looking for a good time and a potential fling? Well, it's not to say that there haven't been successful relationships that do end up sleeping on the first date, but I think pick your battle here. If you are trying to just get into bed early with them on the first date, you are running the risk of implying that you are potentially just looking for a good time. Yes, it might still end up being a fruitful relationship afterwards, and yes, you still can have a potential relationship while still sleeping together on the first date, but you do run that risk. It is still implying that you are very much just looking for a good time.
Hey, and this kind of signals into or segues into the next point, which is you're great short-term mating material, not long-term. And what does that mean? You're great for a bit of fun, but there's something about you that, you know, as harsh as it is, you're just not filling or ticking that person's long-term box checklist.
No.
And especially if you are trying to get into bed with them too early, they might be like, well, maybe they're not that serious. Because would a person who's looking for a long-term relationship be that willing to jump into bed quite early? Potentially. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, and it is quite common. But in a lot of cases and circumstances, that person might be like, well, you know what? If all they want me for is fun, I'm happy to put them in the fun box. I'm more than happy to not put them in the long-term long-term potential husband or wife position. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think sometimes you can, as a guy, I think you would take that more as a compliment than a girl. Like if as a guy you weren't that willing to date someone, but you found out, hey, I'm just their booty call, I'm just a bit of arm candy for them, that's a bit more of a compliment than if you were a girl in that position, I would say. And that girl is saying, oh, well, I am for that person as a bit of arm candy and a bit of fun and not long-term potentials. I think there is a little bit of a difference, but that does explain why certain situationships end up only being situationships. It's because there's something there which is precluding the person from being like, yeah, they're great now, but that's all I want to keep it at. I don't want it to go any more long-term. I don't want there to be this strong exclusivity attached. I want to have my fun and I want to get out.
Yeah, and look, you very much alluded to the whole sexual aspect of a relationship there as to why it might be short-term versus long-term. And I'll just touch on, I guess, more so the fact that it might not even be about sexual activity here. It might just be the fact that maybe as the guy, maybe you're the guy in this situation, and as a guy, maybe all you've done for the girl is just ask them out for drinks constantly. Maybe drinks has just been your thing, just getting drunk together and then, you know, maybe having some fun after that. And maybe you've just repeatedly gone on drink dates. Maybe it's been like date 4, date 5, and all you've done is you've just gone on drink dates. The girl is probably looking for something a bit more. She probably wants to be taken out, you know, maybe a dinner, maybe a sober type of event, maybe actually feeling a sense of, okay, this guy isn't just looking to get drunk with me. He isn't just looking to, just get drinks in me and have a bit of fun with me. I actually see that he does want something more because he's now taking me on different kind of dates. And I think that is very much a key factor here as well, like the type of dates you're choosing, how you're choosing to go on your dates. Because if you're constantly just doing those things that are easy, those things that just involve getting fucked up together and having that fun together, but you're not signaling that you maybe want something deeper with them, you're looking for something deeper, you're trying to explore different avenues with them, then that is also just saying to the girl that you aren't necessarily a potential long-term partner here, because she doesn't see that in you. She doesn't see that variety in you. All she sees is that guy that just keeps asking her out for drinks, but not that guy that wants to go on different kinds of dates with her and maybe eventually get around family and things like that. If it's always just been that same type of date non-stop, there's no advancement. And like what we said earlier, you need to be progressing with each date. You need to be building up on each date. It's that snowball effect. And if it just stays stagnant the whole time, if it's not changing, if it's not advancing, then you're definitely signaling to just be more of that short-term person rather than that long-term person.
And, you know, there's no solution to any of these that is a cookie cutter approach, because you might fall in one category, multiple or none. And there might be a whole heap of other reasons that maybe we haven't touched on. But the truth is, if you can be at least self-aware of what's driving any one of these things that you may be doing, that goes a long way in, I guess, just being conscious of it if you are going to do it next time, especially if you are looking to get more dates or you're trying to build something a little bit more substantial and a bit more meaningful. So I don't think there's any right way to go about this other than just trying to identify whether you see these behaviors and habits in yourself. And I think the big one that I would really be I think there's one that kind of feeds into a lot of these is, I hate this term with a passion, but it's kind of true. It's the whole idea of an abundance mindset.
What's that?
So it's the idea that you believe in a dating context, if you've got an abundance mindset, you think, okay, well, if it's not this person, I have an abundance, or I have a multitude of other men and women who would be more than happy to date me. And I find that, at least with some people, it's not uncommon to fall into one of these traps. Like, for example, trying to get too serious too early on, is because you think that men, there are few and far between that will actually choose you. So when one does come around, you naturally, as a byproduct, end up idolizing them, and you almost want them to feel as though, you know, at least you feel that they want you to be as serious about them as they are about you, and that creates a sense of discomfort and pressure. So I think something to keep in mind is not to delude yourself into having an abundance mindset, but understanding that potentially the reason you idolize that one girl or the one guy who wasn't actually good for you came from the fact that the last time you had gone on a date or slept with someone was longer than a year ago. So you're hungry, so you want something, but it doesn't mean that you need to go for the 2-minute noodles for your nutrients. It might mean you need something a little bit healthier, and that might take a little bit more time. But at least put yourself in the supermarket first.
Well
and I'm not talking about food here.
Well said, mate. Well, in conclusion, to wrap things up, you kind of just have to do the opposite to what we've just spoken about, hey? We've mentioned 5 key points here as to why you are potentially struggling to get out of those dates and struggling to form something a bit more. Do the opposite to those things. So hopefully these points have alluded a few things to you, have brought a few things into the picture frame that maybe you might not have been aware of. And let us know. As we always say, our DMs are always open. So let us know if you agree with these, if you disagree with them. We'd be more than happy to hear your opinion.
On that note, guys, give us a 5-star rating if you are enjoying our episodes and our content. It helps us more than you know. So we would really appreciate that. And also send through to a friend of yours if you think this episode would relate to them. On that note, guys, we'll see you next week. Ciao.
Bye.